When the Texans attacked free agency this offseason, everybody focused on the obvious moves getting Wyatt Teller, getting Dave Montgomery, getting Braden Smith to improve the offense. They also talked about the extensions to Will Anderson, to Danielle Hunter. They talked about the draft class getting Keelan Rutledge and Caden McDonald. But there was one signing that barely made headlines that was, in my opinion, one of my favorites in that free agent class. And I think it could be one of Nick Caserio's smartest moves of the entire offseason. And that is former Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive lineman Logan Hall. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Logan Hall, the guy who only had 10 career sacks in 4 seasons? That's exactly why I think this signing is so fascinating. Because if you only look at the stat sheet, you're missing the entire story. Today, I'm going to explain why Logan Hall could become one of the Texans' biggest difference makers in 2026, and why the Buccaneers never truly unlocked his potential, as well as why DeMeco Ryans may have found the perfect fit for his defense. So let's get into it. Hello, everybody. If you don't know me, my name's Texans Takeover. I would really appreciate if you were to like or subscribe on this video, show some support to the channel. But yeah, let's dive deeper. Who is actually Logan Hall? So before we talked about why Houston signed him, you have to understand where Logan Hall came from. Because unlike many NFL players who were 5-star recruits and household names from the moment they stepped onto a college campus, that wasn't Logan Hall's story. He was born in Elgin, Oklahoma before moving to Belton, Texas, where he finished high school. And even then, he wasn't considered one of the nation's elite recruits. He was a 3-star prospect. He wasn't choosing between Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, the power programs. Instead, he committed to the University of Houston, a decision that would change his football career. One thing that's really interesting about Logan Hall is that he wasn't just a football player. He also ran track, he competed at hurdles, he threw discus, he did the long jump. And why does that matter? Because we're talking about someone who eventually grew into a 6'6", 283-pound defensive lineman. Guys that size aren't supposed to be able to move the way that Logan Hall does move. The athletic background that he possesses helped him develop his explosion and body control long before he became an NFL prospect. Even years later at the NFL Combine, he ran an impressive 4.88 40-yard dash. Elite movement skills for someone his size, you'd say. That's one of the reasons NFL scouts became so intrigued. They weren't just evaluating production. They were looking at raw athletic traits that can't be taught. And it's safe to say that his college career didn't start with stardom. One thing I really respect about his journey is that nothing came easy for him. He didn't arrive at Houston and immediately dominate, In fact, what he did was he spent his first couple of years developing, learning, adding weight, improving his technique, and every year he seemed to get better and better. Every year he became more disruptive, and then everything clicked. And that was his breakout season in 2021. Logan Hall became one of the best defensive linemen in college football, in my opinion. He finished the season with 47 total tackles, 13 TFLs, tackles for loss, and 6 sacks. He earned first-team All-AAC honors, the American Athletic Conference, and helped lead Houston to one of the best seasons in program history. But here's what the numbers don't tell you. Turn on the tape and you'll immediately notice something. He wasn't winning simply because he was bigger than anyone. He was actually winning because he was quicker than everyone. His first step can constantly beat offensive linemen off the snap. He could line up outside. He could move inside. He chased plays down from the backside, as we still see Will Anderson do so much. He disrupted the pocket. He was exactly the kind of modern defensive lineman NFL teams are searching for. Versatile, explosive, and positionless. And that's kind of why NFL teams loved him. That's why the Tampa Bay Buccaneers decided to select Logan Hall with the 33rd overall pick in the second round in the 2022 NFL Draft. So if you want to think about that for a second, he wasn't, a top end of the first round guy, but he was maybe considered a first round talent by some of the teams in that draft. Pick number 33 is the very first selection of the second round. Teams viewed Hall as one of the most athletic defensive linemen available in that draft. The scouts loved his length, his explosiveness, his versatility, and his upside. At 6'6" and 283 pounds, Hall had the frame to line up at multiple spots across the defensive front, something that fit perfectly with the direction the NFL was heading. The thing is, when you're drafted 33rd overall, fans expect immediate results. They expect double-digit sacks, Pro Bowls, highlight plays every week. And unfortunately, that's where Logan Hall's reputation started working against him. Because over the next 4 seasons in Tampa Bay, he became known as the guy who never lived up to being a top end of the second round pick. But here's a question nobody asks. Was Logan Hall actually disappointing, or Was he simply being asked to do a completely different job than people expected? Because once you dig into how Tampa Bay actually used him, the story becomes a lot more complicated. Arrived in Tampa Bay, he joined a defensive line that already featured established veterans like Vita Vea and other experienced contributors. Instead of becoming the focal point of the pass rush, Hall had to earn his role with the veteran-heavy rotation. That meant learning multiple positions, learning multiple responsibilities, and pretty much doing whatever the coaching staff asked. And the box score doesn't tell the whole story for Logan Hall. Let's look at the career numbers everyone points to. Over 4 seasons with Tampa Bay, Hall played in 66 games, starting 39, and he recorded 101 total tackles, 15 TFLs, 10 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 3 fumble recoveries. It's safe to say those aren't superstar numbers, and nobody's arguing that they are. But here's where context matters. Those statistics came while playing multiple roles across the defensive front, not as a featured interior pass rusher who was allowed to simply attack the quarterback every snap. But it's safe to say his best season shows the potential that Logan Hall has. If you break down his career, you actually see progress. In 2024, he put together arguably his best statistical season. He finished with 28 tackles, 5.5 sacks, 6 tackles for loss. For a defensive lineman who wasn't playing every snap as an attacking 3-tech, that's solid production. Then in 2025, his sack numbers dipped. Immediately, people assumed he'd regressed, but football isn't always that simple. Sometimes the player's assignment changes. Sometimes the defense asks you to sacrifice your own production so somebody else can make the play. That's exactly what happened in Tampa. And that's the role that no one talks about. And this is where things get interesting. Logan Hall recently admitted that Tampa Bay often asked him to play much a different role than the one many fans expected. Instead of constantly attacking outfield, he was frequently responsible for just occupying blockers, something that we're expecting Caden McDonald to do for the Texans. Holding the point of attack, keeping linebackers clean, containing running lanes, and those are the jobs that don't show up on highlight reels. They don't fill up the stat sheet, but they are incredibly valuable. Hall himself said that he believes Houston's defensive system will allow him to play faster and be more aggressive than the role he filled with the Buccaneers. And that's a quote that kind of tells you everything. And that's that the scheme matters. This is something casual fans overlook. Not every defensive lineman is asked to be doing the same job. Some are true pass rushers, some are true run defenders, and some players just eat double teams. Some players are responsible for setting the edge. Others are simply trying to force the quarterback to move into someone else's pressure. It's a very team game along the defensive line. And Todd Bowles' defense in Tampa Bay has been built around versatility in multiple fronts, often asking defensive linemen to play disciplined, assignment-focused football rather than simply attacking every snap. That's not necessarily a bad thing, it just wasn't best fit for Hall's athletic strengths. But it's safe to say that the traits never disappeared for Logan Hall, and that's the part that should excite Texans fans. The athleticism that made Logan Hall the 33rd pick has never disappeared. He's still 6'6", he's still around 283 pounds, he's still exceptionally quick for his size, he's still long enough to disrupt passing lanes, and he's still versatile enough to line up inside or outside. Those are traits you just simply can't coach. NFL teams spend years looking for athletes like this. The problem has never been his physical tools. The question has always been, can a coaching staff unlock them? And I think this is why the Texans saw something different. This is why I don't think Nick Caserio viewed Logan Hall as a player who failed in Tampa. I think he saw something completely different. I think he saw someone that was a former second round pick, still 26 years old, still athletic, still versatile, still productive enough to contribute, and most importantly, a player that maybe just needed to change. The Texans signed Hall to a 2-year contract because they believe there's still untapped upside, and because the financial commitment is modest enough to make it a classic low-risk, high-reward move. That's exactly the kind of player Nick Caserio has targeted throughout his tenure in Houston. Not washed-up veterans, not overpriced for agents, players with talent who haven't quite reached their ceiling. Think about Dominic Robinson as well. So if Tampa Bay never fully unlocked Logan Hall, why does Houston believe they can? The answer comes down to one person, in my opinion, DeMeco Ryans. Because once you understand how the Texans' defensive front operates, everything about the signing starts to make sense. And in my opinion, that's where Logan Hall's career could completely change. One thing we've learned over the past few years, DeMeco Ryans has a very specific vision for his defense. He doesn't want 11 superstars, he wants 11 players who fit together. His defense is built around one simple philosophy: attack, or as you know, swarm. Swarm the quarterback, attack gaps, swarm the football, play fast, play physical, play aggressive. If you've watched the Texans since DeMeco arrived, you've probably noticed something. Houston doesn't ask its defensive linemen to stand still. They aren't sitting there absorbing double teams all game. They're constantly moving, stunting, slanting, looping, creating confusion, making offensive linemen communicate. Because when one player creates pressure, someone gets a sack. That's why Will Anderson had so much success. That's exactly why Danielle Hunter fits so seamlessly into this defense. It's a system built on essentially just creating chaos, and Logan Hall has the athletic profile to thrive in that kind of environment. So where does Logan Hall fit? Let's actually look at Houston's defensive line. On the edge, you probably have the best pass rushing duo in all of football with Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. Those two demand so much attention that the offense coordinators have to build entire protection plans, around them. That changes everything for the players inside because if you're Logan Hall, you're not walking into games as a defense number one pass rusher. You're walking into one-on-one opportunities. Think about that. If an offense slides protection toward Danielle Hunter, who's blocking Logan Hall? If they chip Will Anderson, who's helping the guard? Somebody's going to get isolated, and that's exactly what DeMeco Ryans wants. He wants his offenses to pick their poison, double the edges, or leave the interior vulnerable, double the interior, and Anderson gets one-on-one. There really isn't a good answer to stop the Texans' defensive line. And I think that Hall gives the Texans something that they didn't have. And that's another reason I love the signing, and that's his versatility. Logan Hall isn't just an interior defensive lineman. Throughout his career, he's lined up inside, outside, over the tackle, over the guard, standing up with his hand in the dirt, and that flexibility gives Houston something every defensive coordinator loves: options. Imagine it's 3rd and 8 instead of showing the offense the same look every snap, you can move Hall around. Maybe Anderson rushes inside, maybe Hall kicks outside, maybe Hunter loops behind him. Now the offensive line has to identify where pressure is coming before the snap. The more versatile your defensive linemen are, the harder your defense becomes to prepare for. That's exactly why DeMeco values players like Hall. And I truly believe the Texans believe that they can unlock him. And that's something that's really important. The Texans didn't sign Logan Hall because they think they know exactly what he is. They signed him because they think they know what he can become. And that's a huge difference. Nick Caserio has repeatedly targeted players entering or still in their athletic prime rather than veterans whose best football is likely behind them. Logan Hall is still only 26 years old. For a defensive lineman, in my opinion, that's incredibly young. A lot of interior defensive linemen don't play their best football until they're 27, 28, 29, or even early in their 30s. Why? Because playing defensive lineman in the NFL isn't just about athleticism. It's about technique, hand usage, and leverage, film study, knowing how offensive linemen set their feet, understanding protections. And those are things that takes years in the NFL to master. Hall already has the athletic ability, and now he gets to pair it with more experience than he's ever had before. That's why you take that gamble on such a unique player. And it falls into Nick Caserio's philosophy. One of the reasons I become such a believer in Nick Caserio is that he doesn't chase the headlines, he chases value. Look at how he's built this roster, Danielle Hunter, Azeez Al-Shaair, Sheldon Rankins. These weren't desperate signings, they were calculated. Each one filled a specific need. Each one fit Houston's timeline. Each one came with manageable financial risk. Logan Hall fits that exact blueprint. Instead of spending huge money on an older defensive tackle, Houston found a player with first-round talent who's still entering his prime. That, in my opinion, is smart roster construction. Because if Hall becomes the player the Texans believe he can become, Houston gets premium production without paying premium price. That's exactly how championship teams stay competitive year after year. And another thing, playing next to stars makes everyone better. One thing defensive line coaches always talk about is how pass rush works together. People love giving one player all the credit for a sack, but sacks usually happen because someone else forced the quarterback into that position. Imagine you're a quarterback playing Houston. You take the snap, Danielle Hunter is collapsing the left side, Will Anderson Jr. is beating the right side, and now you step in the pocket. Who's waiting there? That's exactly where Logan Hall can become dangerous. Interior pressure is often more disruptive than edge pressure because quarterbacks can't simply step up and escape. If Hall consistently rushes the pocket, he's making life easier for Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter, the linebackers, the safety. Everyone on that defense essentially benefits. That's why I don't think Houston signed Logan Hall expecting him to become Aaron Donald. They signed him to make everyone around him better. And if he also gives you 6 or 7 sacks, that's an incredible bonus. And then there's the homecoming story. And that's something else that just makes this signing special. This isn't just another free agent. This is a player pretty much coming home. Logan Hall became a star at the University of Houston. He already knows the city. He knows the fan base. He understands what football truly means here. Sometimes people underestimate how much that matters. Players are human. Being comfortable, being close to family, playing in a city you genuinely enjoy, those things can absolutely help someone play better. Hall himself has talked about how excited he was for the opportunity to come back to Houston. That matters, because motivated players usually play their best football. So now we know why the Texans signed Logan Hall. We know why DeMeco Ryans believes he fits this defense. And now we know why Nick Caserio viewed him as another calculated investment rather than just a free agent signing. But here's the biggest question of it all. How good can Logan Hall actually be? And I think that is one of the key questions. What should Texans fans actually expect from Logan Hall? I don't think it's fair to sit here and tell you Logan Hall is suddenly going to become an All-Pro. That's not what this signing is truly about. As I've said multiple times, this signing is about value. And those are two very different things. Because, in my opinion, the NFL is won by depth. And that's one thing we've learned over the past few seasons. You don't win championships simply because of your stars. You win because your entire roster can contribute. Look at Philadelphia, Kansas City. What did all those Super Bowl winning teams have in common? They're constantly rotating defensive linemen, fresh legs, different skill sets, wave after wave of pressure. And that's exactly what Houston is building. Instead of asking Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter to play 90% of the snaps, the Texans want to keep everyone fresh for December and January, because that's when championships are won. Logan Hall isn't replacing anybody. He's just making anybody better. And for me, the value with him isn't just sacks, and that's where fans sometimes get caught up. We judge defensive linemen almost entirely by sacks or tackles for loss or QB pressures, but sacks and all those other statistics don't tell the entire story. Let's say Logan Hall finishes next season with 4 sacks. Some fans will say that's it. But what if those 4 sacks come with 40 quarterback pressures, multiple batted passes, consistently collapsing the pocket, forcing quarterbacks off their spot, drawing holding penalties, freeing up Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. to combine for 30 sacks? Now suddenly his impact looks completely different. Football's the ultimate team sport. Sometimes the player who doesn't make the tackle created the tackle. Sometimes the guy who doesn't get the sack created the sack. Interior pressure changes everything. Quarterbacks hate pressure up the middle because there's nowhere to escape. You can't outrun an edge rusher. You can't step up when the pocket is collapsing directly in front of you. That's why DeMeco Ryans values disruptive interior players so much. Another thing, this is something that feels like another Nick Caserio bet. And that's one thing I've noticed about Nick Caserio. He's incredibly patient. He's not someone that panics. He doesn't chase the ESPN clicks. He looks for inefficiencies. Players whose value is lower than their talent. And that's something he has within his draft philosophy as well. Even players acquired through the draft, like Nico Collins, developed because Houston believed the process instead of giving up too early. Now Logan Hall joins that list. A former second-round pick, still only 26 years old, elite athletic traits, versatility, minimal long-term financial risk. That's exactly the type of player Caserio likes betting on, because if Hall reaches the ceiling, the Texans don't just get a good player, they get tremendous value. Again, that's how championship organizations stay ahead. So it's time for my prediction. I don't think Logan Hall becomes the face of the Texans defense, obviously. That's going to be Will Anderson Jr. for as long as he's here. I don't think he becomes the biggest free agency signing because Danielle Hunter already holds that title, in my opinion. I don't think he leads the team in sacks, but I do think by the end of the season, Texans fans will look back and say, wow, Nick Caserio did it again. I think Hall becomes one of Houston's most reliable defensive linemen. I think he plays meaningful snaps in the big games. I think his versatility becomes something incredibly valuable. And I think he'll finish somewhere with around 30 to 45 tackles, 5 to 7 sacks, double-digit quarterback hits, several tackles for loss, a lot of pressures that don't show up in the box score. Obviously, those aren't all pro numbers, but for a rotational defensive lineman signed on a modest contract, that's a home run in my opinion. So when people look back at free agency, they usually remember the biggest contracts, the biggest names, the splashiest headlines. Very rarely do they remember the type of signing that quietly made the entire team better. I think Logan Hall has a chance to be exactly that player. He's entering his athletic prime. He's joining one of the best defensive coaches in football. He's surrounded by elite talent. He's playing in a scheme that emphasizes exactly what he does best. And perhaps most importantly, Logan Hall doesn't have to be a superstar. Logan Hall really just has to be Logan Hall. Because if Houston gets a version of Logan Hall that scouts believe they're drafting in 2022, the defense becomes even more deeper, even more versatile, even harder to block. And when you're trying to beat quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and the rest of the AFC, sometimes the move that wins you a championship isn't the flashy signing, it's the one that no one saw coming. That's why I believe Logan Hall could end up being the Texans' most underrated free agent acquisition of the offseason. And if Nick Caserio is right, don't be surprised if we're talking about this signing very differently a year from now. So that's everything on Logan Hall. Let me know what you all think down in the comment section below. If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to like, subscribe. All the support does go a long way. We are trying to get to 700 subs before the start of the season, so I would really appreciate if y'all help me try to reach that goal. And thank y'all so much for watching. As always, it's Texan Takeover, and I'm out. Peace.